Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and welcome to the Paris Peace Forum 2020 edition. And welcome also to our session on Blue Gold Water Cooperation for Peace and Development. I think having this session is one of the most critical discussions we should be having at this juncture. The world is facing COVID, and one of the key things that has to be done is to simply wash your hands. And we have countries and persons who still have difficulties when it comes to access to water. Sanitation is still a privilege to some, and actually others are unable to even access basic services such as access to toilets. So this is really a pertinent discussion to have, especially at this junction. Water is essential to life. So where is the challenge to ensuring that we have access to water to everyone? And today we will be having discussions with really important persons in this field who have been working diligently to ensure we have more cooperation when it comes to this strategic resource. I will be your moderator. My name's Fauzia Ali. I am with Women in International Security. I'm the president for the Horn of Africa. And I also play a role as a steering committee for the Paris Peace Forum. So it's really a delight to be hosting this discussion, especially bringing in persons from different parts of the world during this pandemic season. So I will start off by introducing our three speakers today, as we also wait for one who is still connecting. So we will have Mr. Abdullahi Sane. Mr. Abdullahi Sane is the president of the organizing committee, as well as the executive secretary of the 9th World Water Forum, which will be held in Dakar in 2021. He has held various key positions, being a former deputy and president of the Commission on Development and Spatial Planning of the National Assembly of Senegal. He is also a civil engineer and who has specialized in hydraulics. So welcome, Abdullahi Sane, to the conversation. Our second speaker is Dr. Danilo Turk, who I'm sure will be connecting soon. He's an emeritus professor of international law, a diplomat, and a politician. He was the third president of the Republic of Slovenia from 2007 to 2012. And prior to that, he held a number of key positions within the UN. He served as the UN Assistant Secretary General for Political Affairs from 2000 to 2005. He managed Slovenia's campaign for a non-permanent seat at the UN Security Council, of which he served on it from 98 to 99. But from 2015 to 2017, he has continued to chair issues to do with water and peace and security. He's been the chair of the Global High-Level Panel on Water and Peace for the last 2 years, from 2015 to 2017. So he brings in a wealth of knowledge into the conversation. Our third speaker is Mr. Omar El Hattab, who has over 25 years experience in the WASH sector. He is currently the senior advisor of WASH in emergency with UNICEF Program Division based in New York. Prior to that, he served in Middle East, in North Africa, all as regional advisors for WASH. He also held positions as technical advisor for the Kuwait Fund for Arab Economic Development, as well as implementing unit within UNDP in Iraq. He holds a PhD in engineering. So welcome, Mr. Omar El Hatim. So to kickstart the conversation, I'll start with you, Abdullah Sene. Why we have the right to water proclamation? It has been 10 years. But we still have a lot of challenges related to issues of water. And as you know, water crisis can cause a lot of insecurity. It threatens security of countries. So what are the stakes and challenges related to the realization of the right of water? Mr. Sen?
Merci, Madame la modératrice, chers panélistes, Mesdames et Messieurs les participants. Vous avez raison, Madame, d'évoquer l'importance de ce droit fondamental à l'eau. Je rappelle simplement que c'est en 2010 que les Nations Unies ont consacré ce droit fondamental, qui est un droit qui est essentiel pour la réalisation de beaucoup d'autres droits. Le droit à la santé, le droit à la vie, le droit à l'alimentation et plus globalement, je devrais même dire le droit à la dignité humaine. Beaucoup d'efforts ont été faits depuis lors à travers le monde. Les réalisations sont tangibles, mais les défis restent encore très importants parce qu'aujourd'hui, près de la moitié de la population mondiale n'a pas un accès sécurisé à l'eau. Et si on regarde des continents encore beaucoup plus en difficulté comme le continent africain, on verra qu'à ce niveau, l'accès à l'eau reste un problème très critique qui génère aujourd'hui de la pauvreté, qui génère des problèmes de santé, qui génère également des conflits dans certains cas. Ce que je peux dire à ce niveau, c'est que les défis ils sont multiples. D'abord, c'est la démographie. On se rend compte que la démographie galopante en Afrique en particulier, mais aussi dans d'autres zones du monde, constitue un lourd handicap parce qu'il faut investir pour rattraper la démographie. Il faut investir également pour rattraper le renouvellement qui est nécessaire au niveau des infrastructures. Il faut donc beaucoup d'investissements, beaucoup de financement dans un contexte où le financement reste une donnée extrêmement contraignante. S'y ajoute d'ailleurs l'urbanisation aussi galopante, qui est aussi une grande contrainte, puisque l'accroissement rapide de l'urbanisation constitue une contrainte extrêmement forte quand il s'agit de rattraper les besoins dans certaines villes. Et comme les villes aussi se développent de façon assez désordonnée, on a aussi des contraintes, surtout dans les zones périurbaines où l'installation de systèmes d'eau potable constitue véritablement un grand défi. Alors à tout cela vient s'ajouter la problématique du changement climatique qui fait peser des contraintes, des risques à la sécurité de l'eau, puisque ces changements climatiques font peser des contraintes sur la ressource elle-même. Donc le stress hydrique est en train de se développer dans beaucoup de pays à cause des incertitudes, et surtout de ces anomalies qui découlent de la sécurité liée au changement climatique. Nous avons donc de grands défis, mais des défis qui ont, je pense, des solutions. Les solutions, ça passe d'abord par la coopération. Il est extrêmement important de dire qu'en matière de connaissances, il y a possibilité de renforcer les connaissances là où c'est nécessaire, renforcer les capacités à travers la coopération. En matière de financement, il y a des mécanismes qui sont en place mais qu'il faut consolider. Je dois dire que des initiatives importantes sont lancées dans certains pays. Le Sénégal est en train justement de prendre un lead en ce qui concerne la mise en place d'un fonds bleu qui va nous permettre de mobiliser des ressources spécifiques nouvelles de façon innovante pour renforcer les ressources à investir dans ce secteur. C'est donc dire que globalement, les besoins restent très importants, les défis, ils sont là, mais avec la coopération, avec un engagement renouvelé, avec aussi la mobilisation pour l'atteinte des objectifs de développement durable, nous devrions pouvoir envisager l'avenir avec beaucoup plus d'espoir, d'autant plus que la pandémie qui s'est ajoutée ces derniers mois aux multiples défis que j'ai évoqués vient révéler combien l'accès à l'eau est fondamental encore, combien ce droit soit à l'eau devrait être exercé pour assurer une meilleure lutte, une meilleure prévention des pandémies, mais aussi pour construire un monde post-Covid plus résilient où la place de l'eau sera en tout cas une place extrêmement importante.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Abdullahi. So for Omar, there's very interesting issues that has been raised by San. The issue of the pandemic, for instance, one of the key things that the pandemic has done is exacerbate the inequalities. When it comes to the issue of water and access to water, the primary persons who in most instances actually go out long distances to even get access to water are women. So what do you think should be the position of different stakeholders to ensure an inclusive participation when we're looking at development of water policies in particular, as well as ensuring that the local considerations of those communities that really require this really important resource are also included? Omar?
Thank you very much, Dr. Fauzia, for the question. Well, the brief response to the first part of your question is evidence-based advocacy. It's critical for positioning of local considerations and bottom-up approaches, which is critical here. The examples of successful and less successful models are out there. We just need to document them and put them into beneficial use, which is high-level advocacy in this matter. Quite frankly, good water governance will be a cornerstone of global water security over the coming decades. A central dimension of water security involves the protection, allocation, and sharing of the increasingly scarce and polluted water resources among humans and the environment. You know, representing approximately half of the population, and despite the recognized pivotal role in water management since 1992, through the Dublin Principles, women remain underrepresented in water governance processes in local, national, and transboundary settings. Moreover, youth represent nearly half the population in many developing nations where water governance is critical. They are future leaders, decision makers, and more importantly, the managers and users of this shrinking resource, yet their involvement is quite limited. This is problematic not only from a human rights perspective, but also because governance processes are made more effective through inclusion of all stakeholders. Different stakeholders contribute a variety of perspectives, knowledge, and solutions when actively engaged. Involving women in water projects has made them more sustainable, more effective, and also up to 7 times more efficient, according to UNDP Siwi Water Governance Facility. In addition, inclusive practice will ensure that the benefits of water management are shared more equally and has the potential to reduce inequalities, thereby contributing to economic growth and increased social cohesion. Changing climate and extreme weather events have fundamental impacts on all aspects of our lives and our planet, including the management of the world's shared water resources. In order to meet these challenges of today and tomorrow, we must broaden our conception of who the relevant decision makers are and promote inclusive decision making. Ever-growing uncertainties with regards to future water availability and demand stemming from the impacts of climate change have human security implications. Expected changes will foundationally direct how individuals are going to be affected by the changing availability of water, and from the national and regional security perspective, how these changes will affect geopolitics and interstate relations between countries sharing freshwater resources. You know, a study released in June of 2019 and carried out jointly by environmental and conflict researchers suggested that armed violence across the globe is expected to increase by around 26% in a scenario involving only 4 degrees Celsius rise in global temperature. Can you imagine that? Understanding, learning from, and enhancing water diplomacy processes is critical for countries and communities to prepare and respond to the expected challenges to come. Clearly, as a dynamic multi-track process, water diplomacy enables a broad sector of stakeholders sharing water resources to discuss and identify solutions for sustainable management of shared resources, as well as mitigate shared risks. In contrast to traditional diplomatic efforts focused on relation between states, water diplomacy is able to actively engage a range of diverse stakeholders and decision makers, including diplomats, technical experts, as well as civil society representatives of affected communities, among others. Water diplomacy processes are additionally enhanced by ensuring the negotiation teams are reflective of the diverse societies they represent. Here, quite frankly, much effort is still needed, as evidence reveals a persistent gender gap in the water sector, particularly at transboundary level, which continues to be male-dominated. This happens despite evidence that balanced gender representation in peace processes results in agreements that are more durable and less likely to relapse. Unique initiatives such as the Women in Water Diplomacy Network and the Nile Basin aim to mitigate this deficit by elevating women water decision makers and disseminating a shared perspective, such as the 2020 joint statement in support of enhanced inclusive transboundary water cooperation through their network. Moreover, emphasis also needed to leverage the leadership and engagement of young people in water diplomacy processes. As seen with regards to climate action, it's often the young voices that drive fundamental behavioral change. This is particularly relevant to transboundary water management in conflict-sensitive basins, as riparian countries experience heightened youth population growth. Recurrent activities such as the annual Central Asian Leadership Program on Environment for Sustainable Development, organized by the Regional Environmental Center for Central Asia, aim to strengthen young voices and develop the next generation of water environmental leaders, including water diplomats. Ample evidence exists to show how young farmers who lost both their livelihoods and future employment prospects as a result of protracted water scarcity have been targeted by recruiters from terror and criminal networks, especially in countries like Iraq and Afghanistan. Achieving sustainable and effective transboundary water management requires an all-hands-on-deck approach. We simply cannot afford the costs of maintaining the status quo. Success requires a proactive effort to create inclusive and strong engagement, both top-down and bottom-up, and involving the whole of the society in our shared water agenda. By leveraging more actors and communities into inclusive water diplomacy processes, we are able to foster a cadre of water champions, mitigate human security implications, and improve interstate relations between countries sharing a fresh water resource. I hope that answers your question, Fawzia. Back to you.
Okay. Thank you, Omar. It actually does answer most of what I was looking for. Over to you, Danilo. Welcome to the session. I'm glad you are able to connect. So we've been discussing the impact the pandemic has had, especially on water and access to water. So my question to you is, how are basic water services being provided during these times of pandemic? For most countries that are actually coming out of armed conflict, countries where you are very much still in the developing stage, we have weak supply systems. What is actually some of the policies that can support some of these weak supply systems that exist in certain countries, especially during this pandemic, where water is really a critical asset? Danilo?
Thank you very much, Fawzia, and apologies for my late arrival, which was due to some technical difficulties. Now, let me make a few points, first fairly general and then more specific for the precarious, fragile situations, some of which are characterized by armed conflict. Now, you see, it's important to understand that the Sustainable Development Goals included Goal 16, which is about the need to ensure availability of safe drinking water and sanitation for all. That's the UN objective. Now, obviously, it's not an easily achievable one. And before the pandemic, just before the pandemic, the assessment in the United Nations was that the implementation of that sustainable development goal was seriously off track. So that was the situation before the pandemic. Now, during the pandemic, things obviously have become more complicated because the pressure for water has grown. And let us take a look at three different types of situations in this particular context. One, for example, India suffered the problem of insufficient infrastructure for availability of water. In the cities, according to estimates, there are about 60% of people who do not have access to running water. And in the rural area, this percentage is even higher. That is why the government has adopted a plan last year, before the pandemic, to invest about $50 billion in development of water infrastructure. And that process is taking place now during the pandemic. However, the increased demand for water has made the project more complicated. And I think that that's a good example of the type of problems that the world has to face. We should not think that this is limited only to developing countries. In Europe, according to World Health Organization, there are still about 16 million people who are permanently without access to safe drinking water in a fairly developed part of the world. 16 million people are in that kind of situation. And obviously, at the time of water disasters, which do happen in Europe also, the problem is even more serious. Now then, of course, there are situations of armed conflicts, which we must not forget. There, the problems of water are very serious. The recent UNICEF study, Water Under Fire, has emphasized that and has shown in the cases of Syria, Yemen, also in the post-conflict Iraq, and in the current conflict in Ukraine, the fragility of water infrastructure in armed conflict and the need for what humanitarian organizations call for protection of water infrastructure. Now, the Geneva Water Hub, where I'm active and where we have prepared the global high-level report on water and peace, we have emphasized the need for special protection of water infrastructure during wherever possible, and in a place like Ukraine that should be possible. And those protections should prevent creation of what we know in modern reverberating effects. So an attack on a water well, for example, has reverberating effect on a variety of infrastructures and services in the larger area. So it's not only the immediate objective of attack that is affected, but a larger area and a variety of social services. And finally, there are certain parts of the world where I think special attention is needed, and I would like to emphasize the region of Sahel in Africa, where we have seen, as a result of recent floods, the recent disaster that has affected the region in August and September, the problems growing. I'll be happy to talk about this further as we move along with our discussion, and I would like to stop here just saying that in an area which is characterized by a variety of problems and an ongoing armed conflict, there has to be still enough attention and enough wisdom to approach the problem of peace in a manner which takes care of development needs, including in particular water. And as I said, I'll come back to this when we continue with our discussion.
Mm-hmm. Oh, thank you for that. So just picking up from what Danilo has said and looking at the sub-Saharan Africa in particular, so Abdullah, you are going to be hosting the 9th forum, which is happening next year. What do you think, in your opinion, is the finances that need to be mobilized to ensure humanitarian response for the rapid deployment of a comprehensive response when you look at issues of water, health, and sanitation?
Merci pour cette très importante question. Je voudrais d'ailleurs profiter de l'occasion pour rappeler que, à cause des conséquences et des incertitudes liées à la pandémie, le président de la République du Sénégal, en relation et en concertation avec le Conseil mondial de l'eau, a décidé du report du Forum mondial de l'eau d'un an. Ce forum se tiendra maintenant en mars 2022, plus exactement du 21 au 26 mars 2022. Nous pourrons y revenir. Évoquant maintenant la problématique du financement, je rappelle simplement qu'en 2015, au moment où les objectifs de développement durable étaient conçus, la Banque mondiale avait évalué qu'il fallait environ 40 milliards de dollars par an pour pouvoir atteindre l'accès universel à l'eau, à l'assainissement en 2030. C'est donc dire qu'il y avait déjà une évaluation assez précise. Et à l'heure du bilan, aujourd'hui, on peut dire qu'en 2017, par exemple, il n'y a eu que 13,2 milliards de dollars qui ont été investis en Afrique au titre de l'accès à l'eau en termes de financement pour les infrastructures et autres, et sans tenir compte, comme je l'ai dit, de tout ce qui est lié à la maintenance, à l'exploitation. Donc, le gap, il est là. C'est donc à peine le tiers de ce qu'il faut qui est aujourd'hui mobilisé pour aller vers l'accès à l'eau. La conséquence, bien sûr, c'est que nous ne sommes pas sur une trajectoire qui nous permet d'atteindre l'accès universel à l'eau en 2030. D'où la nécessité de remobiliser les énergies, de remobiliser la volonté politique, de remobiliser toutes les ressources pour que nous puissions investir davantage d'efforts afin d'atteindre l'accès universel à l'eau et à l'assainissement, qui est un droit, comme ça a été rappelé tantôt. Alors, il y a aujourd'hui donc une nécessité, si je prends le cas de l'Afrique, du Sahel qui a été évoqué, une nécessité de renforcer d'abord les budgets nationaux qui sont dédiés à l'eau, parce que sans eau, comme je l'ai dit, on ne peut pas garantir ni la santé, ni le développement, et on peut même risquer de générer ou d'entretenir des conflits, et le président Danilo Turk l'a évoqué tantôt, et c'est extrêmement important. Si nous avançons, l'idée c'est de dire qu'il faut aujourd'hui développer de nouveaux instruments. Si je prends le cas du Sénégal, qui est mon pays, je dois rappeler que ces dernières années, de gros efforts ont été faits pour mettre la priorité sur l'eau. Et aujourd'hui, de façon exceptionnelle, le Sénégal a atteint un taux d'accès à l'eau en milieu urbain de 98% en milieu rural, et en milieu urbain, et en milieu rural, ce taux est de 91%. Ce sont des taux extrêmement importants qui résultent d'efforts extrêmement aussi mobilisateurs et importants. Et pour consolider ces efforts, à l'image d'autres pays africains, le Sénégal est en train, comme je l'ai évoqué tantôt, de dégager des stratégies pour renforcer les ressources. D'abord, les ressources internes et les ressources politiques. Comme je l'ai évoqué tantôt, le fonds bleu, le Sénégal entend mobiliser des fonds de pension qui jusque-là étaient destinés à autre chose, entend également mobiliser les fonds de dépôt et de consignation, autant de ressources nouvelles qui, à notre avis, devraient venir contribuer en tout cas à remettre l'Afrique sur une voie, l'Afrique, mais aussi le monde, puisque les ODD, c'est une affaire mondiale, une affaire de solidarité, une affaire qui concerne tous les États. Donc, il faut, à mon avis, que l'Afrique d'abord, mais aussi les autres pays, renforcent substantiellement les efforts et que l'on puisse partir peut-être des 15 milliards qui sont mobilisés aujourd'hui par an de dollars à 40 milliards tel que ça a été estimé par la Banque mondiale pour que nous puissions atteindre ces objectifs-là. Il y a une perspective qui se dessine et nous sommes en plein dans la COVID et les débats aujourd'hui portent sur les modalités de financement de la relance, mais aussi comment compenser les pertes qui sont enregistrées dans certains pays qui sont très fragiles. Et le président de la République du Sénégal, le président Macky Sall, a lancé une idée en ce qui concerne l'annulation, voire l'étalement du remboursement de la dette. Cette initiative a été largement soutenue par ses pairs du continent africain, mais aussi par d'autres chefs d'État étrangers, notamment le président de la République française, mais aussi d'autres en Europe et ailleurs. L'idée serait aussi de faire en sorte que les bénéfices qui pourraient être tirés de cette initiative puissent être injectés majoritairement, ou en tout cas pour une large part, afin que nous puissions vraiment renforcer les ressources financières qui sont dédiées à l'accès à l'eau et à l'assainissement. Et nous avons un gros espoir que le Forum mondial de l'eau, et j'y reviendrai tantôt, qui va se tenir à Dakar, sera une bonne opportunité pour mobiliser les énergies, remobiliser les partenariats et faire en sorte que nous puissions nous situer à nouveau sur une trajectoire qui nous permet d'espérer d'atteindre un accès universel à l'eau en 2030.
Thank you for that, Abdullah. So as we also take in questions from some of our participants, I'm actually going to pose a question to you, Amar, coming also from the participants. Picking from what Abdullah has said, he's brought across the importance of strengthening financial resources, the need for international cooperation, but also in particular looking at national strategies that are going to have an impact towards ensuring there's access to water. He shared the way Senegal has been able to do so to a level of 91%, now even in rural settings. So my question to you, Amar, is do you think that we need a global political UN governance in water issues? Could this be useful because it does not exist today at the moment? And this is a question from one of the participants.
Thank you very much, Fawzia. With your permission, can you please repeat the question? There's a technology problem here.
Okay. So the question is, do you think that a global political UN governance in water issues could be useful as it does not exist today?
Yes, absolutely. This is really needed. We need to mobilize all possible resources and platforms for the cause. The current pandemic threw us at least 50 years back into history. According to the World Bank, all poverty eradication efforts that had taken place since 2015 were simply eroded in those past 8 or 9 months since the pandemic struck the world. Fiscal space is shrinking worldwide, and we really need action, concerted efforts in order to achieve the SDGs. This is really vital. I hope that answers your question, Fawzia. Back to you.
So the next question is actually to Danilo. How do you evaluate the legal, technical, economic, and social tools to identify and reduce risks of conflict related to the management of water resources?
Well, of course, this is, thank you very much. This is a very comprehensive and complex question, which I will try to answer kind of telegraphically to some of these elements that are included in the question. As far as the legal instruments are concerned, I would like to emphasize the importance of soft law. I mean, the United Nations has convened a water action decade. And although we cannot expect very hard legal outcomes, we can expect very important recommendations from there. And I believe that the 9th World Water Forum in Senegal would be a very important opportunity to articulate some of the powerful recommendations to be subsequently used and taken care of by the General Assembly of the United Nations. We in the Geneva Water Hub, we are working on specific lists of principles and norms that already exist and have to be implemented. So in the legal domain, there are many things that can be done. In the on the economic side, I would like, among many instruments, and my friend Abdullah Sen has already spoken about the financing. What I would like to add is in the shared water basins, both river basins and underground aquifer basins. It's important to try to develop joint investment plans. Countries of the basins coming together, making a joint investment plan and present it to potential financial actors together. That would be an example that I would like to offer in that regard. But I would like us to all to think more about the social aspects of, which is also part of your question, the social aspect of instruments that may be used. And here I believe the international community has not paid enough attention to the existing local and regional realities that have to be taken into account. And again, I would like to mention the region of Sahel, where Geneva Water Hub has had several consultations with experts, with people from the region, discussing various problems and so forth. And as I said before, the road to peace, the road to peace and stability leads through a comprehensive development. You cannot do it in purely military terms or in terms of security services. It has to be done with a developmental approach. Water is, of course, critical in that approach. And there exist traditions that have to be respected and used in development of water management for the future. Some of our experts were suggesting that there were in the past years around 300 cases involving about 2,000 local mediators who were addressing what they call micro conflicts, small local tensions relating to water. So effective addressing this sort of things really at the grassroots level, micro conflicts with local mediators, with the assistance to this traditional social structures that already exist, that's very important and hasn't been done sufficiently before. Then the question is, how is the whole educational approach designed? Education does not necessarily have to take place in the classrooms that we know in urban areas. They can be done differently. And again, using local tradition would be important. And then obviously at the national level and regionally, it would be important to develop a body of knowledge, a body of understanding for the larger regional aspects of water management, building what could be called a kind of a new water elite, but not elite in a sense of being far away from the needs of the people, but elite that really understands the regional aspects, that is capable of addressing problems that transcend boundaries and come to the solutions that affect everybody. And of course, in Africa, there are excellent examples. The Senegal River system is such. Of course, it cannot be replicated directly, but the basic principle of bringing together all the intellectual, economic, and social resources in a transboundary context, that's a very valuable experience which could inspire building of these elites and slowly developing sufficiently comprehensive approach to water issues.
Thank you. Building of a new elite group on issues of water. Very interesting. So we have, unfortunately, 3 minutes left. It has been a good conversation so far. And I think one of the key things before we sign off is to quickly ask you, Abdullahi, because of the 9th forum that is coming up. What do you think will change on the ground by having this forum in 2022? if you can summarize that before we sign off in just 1.5 minutes, if possible.
Merci bien, madame. Ça me donne l'occasion de confirmer la volonté du Sénégal et du Conseil mondial de l'eau d'organiser un forum efficace. Efficace en termes d'impact au plan social, en termes d'impact économique et politique. Et pour cela, nous avons d'abord voulu attaquer la dimension politique qui est fondamentale. Et le Sénégal, à l'initiative du président Macky Sall, va organiser pour la première fois un important sommet des chefs d'État, incluant également les grandes institutions internationales pour lancer des initiatives et remobiliser des engagements en direction de l'accès universel à l'eau. Et déjà, l'Union africaine a décidé de soutenir le Sénégal en organisant en marge du forum un sommet des chefs d'État africains. Donc, c'est déjà dire qu'au plan politique, nous allons avoir un impact extrêmement important. Et les résultats du forum de Dakar vont impacter certainement le processus onusien, notamment quand il s'agira de faire le bilan à mi-parcours des objectifs de développement durable, parce que nous sommes à mi-parcours, mais les résultats également de Dakar devraient alimenter les négociations sur le bilan à mi-terme 2023 de la décennie de l'eau. Ça, c'est au plan politique. Au plan du terrain, nous entendons à travers ce que nous avons appelé l'initiative Dakar 2021, impulser des projets qui vont apporter des réponses de terrain. Et enfin, avec la plateforme multi-acteurs, j'en termine là, nous entendons inviter tous les acteurs du monde, dans leur grande diversité, à construire des partenariats qui vont nous permettre de construire des réponses concrètes. C'est une ambition importante, mais à laquelle nous invitons tous les acteurs à nous rejoindre pour que nous puissions le relever et assurer ce droit à l'eau pour la paix et le développement.
Yeah. So thank you. Ambitious initiative it is, but one that is really required. It's one that is very, very important. So all the best as you hold the very first Water Security for Peace and Development conference in 2022. So we have to sign off here because our time is up. Mine is to say thank you to the Paris Peace Forum for organizing this really good conversation. I think the issue of water is one of critical need for international cooperation. Thank you to all the speakers for making the time to speak with us today, and of course also to the participants who've signed in, asked really good questions. Unfortunately, we could not be able to answer all of them, but we look forward to continuing to interact via the app as well as we continue with the Paris Forum itself, the different sessions. Thank you, and I would say goodbye and enjoy the remaining discussions under the forum.
Thank you, Fawzia.